Welcome, Comadres and Friends. I am Tess Tobin, Project Manager of Las Comadres and Friends National Latino Book Club.
Yeah,
The
baby.
leadership team is pleased to have you join us for tonight's podcast as we are in our 19th year, and we are in our 19th year. It has been our privilege to support Latino authors throughout these 19 years, and we look forward to many more years to come. We'd also like to extend a warm welcome to readers following us on our live Twitter chat at Read Latino Lit. Tonight, please help us welcome authors Adela Pineda Franco and Cynthia Pelayo. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping notes. Please keep yourselves on mute. You can keep your videos on. We suggest you put yourself on speaker mode, but gallery works just as well. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat and we will try to get to them. So now let's start with our book club history. Comadre Nidia?
Thank you, Comadre Tess. Okay, so welcome everyone, comadres and friends. My name is Nidia Marcella, and I'm the book club membership coordinator. Our book club began in July 2004, and that was in the apartment of Maria Ferrer here in New York City. But after a brief pause, Nora Comstock reimagined and relaunched the organization nationwide. Her vision was to promote Latina authors, bring our community into bookstores, and support our writers. In October of 2006, we began hosting teleconferences. And now, in our 19th year, we continue to share work by Latina authors with book lovers everywhere. Our book club and teleconferences are designed to encourage everyone, not just Latinos, to read more Latina literature, explore diverse cultural perspective, and gain deeper insight into Latino roots and heritage. We are creating a space where readers can explore the rich inner world of Latino writers through their written work. We currently have book clubs in 12 cities across different time zones. And we invite you to join a local chapter that fits your schedule. If your city isn't represented, we welcome your help in starting a new club. For more information, visit our website, latinolit.com. I will put it in the chat. So please spread the word and invite others to join our literary community. Okay, Comadre Julia, take it away.
Thank you so much. Welcome, comadres and friends, to our October 2025 podcast. Hi, everyone. I'm Comadre Julia Abrantes, and I've been a lifelong lover and supporter of Latina literature. I've had the honor of serving with Las Comadres and Friends National Latino Book Club and Empowering Latino Futures, where I helped promote and celebrate our incredible authors. I was also part of the founding board of Latinx in Publishing, working to expand visibility and opportunity for our community. I now live in Delray Beach, Florida, and I'm so thrilled to be here with all of you tonight. Our first interview tonight is with Cynthia Pelayo, a Bram Stoker Award-winning and international Latino book award-winning author and poet, Pelayo writes fairy tales that blend genre and explore concepts of grief, mourning, and cycles of violence. She is the author of Loteria, Santa Muerte, The Missing, Homes of My Night, Into the Forest, and all the way through Children of Chicago, Crime Scene, The Shoemaker's Magician, as well as dozens of standalone short stories and poems. Her works have been reviewed in the New York Times, Chicago Tribune, LA Review of Books, and more. Interviewing Cynthia is Comadre Carmen Zayas, a Cuban-born people and culture executive and longtime comadre who blends her heritage, leadership experience, and creative spirit to build inclusive, heart-centered workplaces. Based in Cedar Park, Texas, she has led culture and HR transformations across nonprofit, tech, and professional service organizations, always guided by her mantra, be a good human. A proud mom of 2 grown kiddos, she enjoys storytelling, community, making and watching films, spending time with her family, and reading. Take it away, Comadre Carmen.
Thank you so much, Comadre Julia. Cynthia, welcome. We're so glad you're here today.
Thank you for having me.
Very exciting. So we will be talking, as you know, about your book, Vanishing Daughters. And I do want to say a little personal thing about the book after reading it before we start the conversation. I was captivated by the fact that you were able to take elements of fairy tales, horror, true crime, love, all these elements of supernatural, all these elements, and weave them into a very riveting thriller.
Thank
And
you.
the fact that it was not only universal themes of death and dying and caregiving, but you made it very personal as we followed Briar Rose through her journey of loss and grief. And so thank you very much. It was an incredibly compelling book, and I could not put it down. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
Very good. So my first question is, for those of us who haven't, those of us in the audience who haven't read the book, if you could, in your own words, give us a synopsis of the book, and then maybe help us to understand what compelled you, what sparked writing this book.
So the story follows Briar Rose Thorne as she returns to her childhood home after her mother died. The house is an old Chicago brownstone mansion on the south side of Chicago. It's dilapidated. She works as a freelancer, so not only is she taking over this massive stress of this new home, she has a very fixed budget and she's grieving her mother quite intensely. And also, she still has to work. So while she's researching a number of articles, she comes across several cases of murdered women throughout the south side of Chicago, primarily like Black and Latino women. And they've all been killed in very similar circumstances. And then she soon becomes targeted by a serial killer, while at the same time experiencing these very strange dreams. What compelled me to write it was I had just submitted a book, and then I was on deadline to write my next book, and my father died. So I was like, I don't know how I can write a book in a few months. I have no idea how I'm even going to be able to like get out of bed, let alone have like the mental faculties to write a book. And I was really, if anyone's been a caregiver, not only is there a lot of stress being a caregiver to someone who, and you might hear my son, he's in the backyard. So if you hear like children like whooping and hollering, they're my children. They should be in bed, but my husband had to run them in the yard. And so there's a lot of pressure and stress and a lot of like big emotions when you're caring for someone end of life, and you can't really show those emotions to your loved one. You have to just go through the motions and take care of them. And then to lose them, it was really overpowering. My father didn't want hospice. He wanted to die at home. My siblings and I, we thought we were like, we thought we were getting into, we're like, we'll do it. And even though one of my brothers is a nurse, I don't think none of us knew what we were really getting into. And so I really wanted to talk about what happens to you physically after someone dies. You're living in a fog for a few months, and I don't think I haven't really heard anyone talk about what that does to you. And I also wanted to talk about death and dying and thinking about what else is there, not in a religious way, just because I wanted to be able to make it as accessible to a number of readers as possible. And then, I mean, I also do tackle a lot of true crime in my work. And so there are about 51 plus Black and Latina women who have been murdered throughout the south side of Chicago in very similar circumstances. And we don't know what's happening there.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. And Cynthia, it comes through loud and clear that it's a very deeply personal book. And like I said, I think it will resonate, especially with all readers, but with Latinas, right? We're caregivers, right? And I know a lot on the audience right now is going, yeah, we've been in in situations where we say we can handle this, and then it's like, oh my God, it's just overwhelming. So thank you for sharing that. You work, especially this book talks a lot about things like faith, even though not religious, right? But spirituality. It talks about life after death, the strength of love, right? How does your cultural background, how did it help shape those pieces?
While writing it, I just really wanted to put in it, like, I loved my dad, that my dad was like, every day, every single morning when I wake up and I make a cup of coffee, like that was our ritual. We would make coffee and we'd read the paper and sit outside. And so even today before I take my sip of coffee, it's like, good morning, Dad, because he was everything to me. I loved my father deeply. And so, I mean, the love of him was something that is and just how much he cared for me and took care of me. We were very close. I had a very, I'm sure many Latinas here can nod in agreement that, a very difficult relationship with my mother, who was very she's stern. My parents were born in the 1940s, so it's a very different time period. However, my father was very much more lax and much more like, you should live, and I want you to live and love and explore everything that life has to offer you. And my father was very like, I don't want you grieving me. I want you to live. And so I wanted to write about somebody tangled and stuck in grief, and how do you get out of it?
And again, it came through very loud and very clear, you can tell. So help us to understand, there's a lot of fairy tale elements to it, right? You've got Sleeping Beauty, you've got The Woman in White, you've got even the urban legends of the hitchhiker. Help us to understand why you chose those to deepen those themes, right, of grief and loss and dying.
I I was thinking about the vanishing hitchhiker because I started thinking about the women who have been found murdered, and how many of them have been found along the streets, in garbage cans. And I just kind of had this thought, like, how awful for people to, when they walk home, they know someone died there. And I was like, well, wait, isn't that what the vanishing hitchhiker is? Or could that be what the vanishing hitchhiker is? This woman in white? And so I started thinking to myself, is the woman in white that so many cultures know a murder victim, and that we just keep seeing them, and maybe it's our job to set them free. So that's kind of where my thought process came in with that. And so I was really interested in just kind of being trapped in grief, and how do we break out of the pattern of getting someone out of this grief cycle.
Thank you. And I know that you, being from Chicago, is part of your identity. I've listened to your interviews. It's just a part of who you are.
Yeah.
Besides being Puerto Rican, I'm sure also. And so I see the role that the South Side of Chicago and its history, how beautifully it's woven throughout the book. I'm curious as to how you develop the role of the house, because the house is such a living thing that helps her, right, navigate her journey. I'm just wondering what your thought process was as you were developing the role of the house.
So there are some really fantastic old buildings throughout the city of Chicago. A lot of Eastern European immigrants, when they came here to the city, they built homes. They wanted to build homes that they remembered, like, and those were castles. And so we have a lot of these like brownstones that have like these fantastic detailing, and they're like little mini castles, and they're in different parts of the city. Some of them have been rehabbed, and they're just like, in the multi-millions. Some of them, depending on the neighborhoods, they are dilapidated because of disinvestment. And I've been trying to get into like one of them, like an older one, to kind of like look. And so I would just like sit and look through them on Zillow, the older ones and all the fantastic details. And then I started thinking about haunted houses, right? Many of us know the trope of the haunted house. And it's hard for me to believe that a house that someone has lived in for so long would like turn on them and be like mean and scary. So I wanted to create like a haunted house that loved her, that was kind of like, I'm trying not to scare you. I have to show you these things, and they might be a little scary because I'm trying to communicate with you. And so that was my thought process with the house. So the house, there are these hauntings happening, but they're sort of scary in a way, but it's all with the house is trying to tell her what to do.
Okay. I also love the characters. There weren't that many characters in the book, but they were also richly done. And so help me to understand the inspiration for Daniel, right? Her boyfriend, for her best friend. Help me to, and even the mother. The mother was such a, and I thought I enjoyed the twist. Well, I shouldn't say twist. I enjoyed the fact that you made her and her daughter have such a fabulous relationship, right? Because to what you were saying earlier, don't know if it's because we're Latino or not. It's a difficult relationship sometimes between mother and daughter. So I appreciated that you had a lot woven in of mom was right? She kept coming to these realizations of, even though we had a great relationship, there's things that I kind of tossed aside, but she was right. So talk to me a little bit about the inspiration for the characters that supported her through her journey.
Right. So the mother, like I just kind of pictured like this very like eclectic artist type mother who was very spiritual, but not like overly religious. I had a very conservative mother, a Latino mother, very, I mean, there were the novena candles and the statues, and it was all, it was really intense. And so I kind of thought, well, what if it was a little different? It was just kind of like, uh, what if her mother was very spiritual in the way of talking about positivity? Like, I want you to think good things about yourself. I want you to believe that when you wake up in the morning, you can create the life that you want, as opposed to like, like I said, I just remember, there's just this harshness with, many of us who have these Latino mothers that grew up in this time period. It was very strict and tough. It was just such tough love. And so I wanted like more of like a ton. And then religion was scary. It was like anything religious, it was like terrifying. And all the language around it was just super like, if you sin, you will die and go to hell. And I'm like, okay. And so I wanted to do something different that was more tender and kind of like beneficial. And that was my dad, because my dad growing up wasn't religious. He was very like, he was like so like cosmopolitan, and just it was a very non-traditional household for that time, because my mother worked and my dad was very like, he took care of the kids, and so it was interesting. um and so with the supporting characters, I I wanted to show like she had a community, but she kept pushing them away, because when you're in that grief moment and you tend to do that, push people away. But I wanted to show that she still had these people, and even though she kept pushing them away, they were on the periphery, like, we're here when you need us.
There was also, you alternated the perspective sometime between the serial killer
Yes.
and, which I found fascinating, and it felt very authentic, the way you portrayed the thoughts and the patterns of the serial killer. So I'm sure there was a lot of research involved there. And I wonder, was that a little disturbing? What was your takeaway after that?
So originally it was like a detective novel, and so those serial killer chapters were detectives trying to investigate. And my editor at Thomas and Mercer, she was like, "Why don't we do a serial killer?" And I was like, "Okay." I was like, "I'm not." I just agreed right away, and I was like, "Oh, what did I get myself into?" Because I did not want to get into that headspace, and so I went back and I read Silence of the Lambs, and I read some of the Dexter books. And then I looked at like this Joyce Carol Oates book that I couldn't even finish because it was so intense. It was called Zombie. And that is like a fictionalized version of Jeffrey, like a young Jeffrey Dahmer. And I was like, yeah, I can't, I'm good. Just a few chapters. And I was like, and so I kind of took a little bit from each of those three voices and I pulled it together. I wanted it to be a very cold and detached and grim killer. And so when I would write those chapters, I'd write them as fast as I could and then get out of their head.
I was thinking that as I was reading it, that it must have been disturbing to write it. It was riveting to read, but disturbing to write it. And so I don't think I've asked this question. If I have, please stop me. But your lead character, Briar Rose, like many women, I think, in these roles, is both fearless and fragile. Talk to me about developing her emotional voice, her character.
I think you know, she was sort of the complete opposite of her mother. So while her mother was very like, you know, everything is love and you can control your thoughts, Briar is just very much more scientific. She's, you know, everything, it has to be based in reality. However, when her mother died, I think she was just kind of shocked as well with the emotions of grief. And so, but she wanted to do everything herself. She wanted to take care of herself, even though she was not taking care of herself at all. And so I think a lot of people, when they're in these positions, there's no blueprint for grieving. You're sort of just like going through the motions, and you're lucky if you eat, and you're really lucky if you remember to take a shower because you're just like in bed crying. And then the motivation to kind of get out of this is that there's this killer now that's outside of your house and is looking for you. And so that is kind of what had to kind of ramp up her motivation.
Very good, thank you. But Cynthia, what surprised you the most when you were, as you were developing the story, when you finished the story? What surprised you the most, either about how the story developed or what you learned about yourself?
I mean, I added a lot in there that was about like that dealt with like the theory of, or not theory, but like thoughts about consciousness. And so I was just really fascinated with those types of areas that I wrote about. So I think that helped me a lot too with grieving, to kind of be like, yeah, and even looking at it from like a scientific standpoint, like, well, everything's energy, including us. And so energy is never destroyed. And so it was nice to kind of be able to reflect on that in the text.
Very good, thank you. And I've got two more questions. And I'm really enjoying the conversation, by the way. Thank you for sharing and then for that authentic voice. If, as the story developed and when it was completed, if you could have other women, it can be any reader, but let's focus on women, especially Latino women. If they could, what is it that you would hope they walked away with when they turn that last page and they put the book down, they go, great book. What else do you hope that they kind of take away?
That it's okay to grieve and that you shouldn't feel shamed to grieve. Um, uh, that that was I liked to be able to write about the messiness of grieving, and how it's okay if you don't know where you're at in time and space, because your job in that moment is to take care of yourself and to save yourself too.
Good. Thank you. And I will let you know, Cynthia, being in a similar, my father recently had a pretty big stroke, a significant stroke, and he is my world. And so reading this book, I have to tell you, was on a personal level, gave me so much pause and reflection and things. And there's that hope, right? That, yeah, you may be completely disoriented. That just stood out for me. It's completely disoriented. I just wanted to let you know on a personal level, and I'm sure I'm not the only one in the audience right now who, wanted to say that. Wanted to switch a little bit and talk about, I read one of your, or heard one of your interviews, and you were talking about how difficult it can be for women of color, for people of color as authors to get, right, to get the same level and intensity and maybe promotion in the marketing. So I'm sorry to switch to it, but I found that very, I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about, so what do you do about it as a woman of color who's an author?
It's I think a lot of us have to do it on our own. And a lot of us do the self-promotion with social media, attending events. Many of us pay out of pocket to attend events. However, many Latinas still work full time that are authors. I get to do this full time, and that's a privilege because at least I have the time, and having time as an author is like the greatest privilege. Because so many Latinas are trying to write and get published, but you're working all day. You come home, you can only write so many words within that space and take care of yourself. And so when you're in that sort of position, it kind of feels like you're up against all these like challenges. And so, even if you're working full time, even doing social media, that's exhausting. That still takes up time and energy and managing an audience. Even with writing full time, social media takes up a lot of time. I wish I could just focus on the writing. Um, I can only hope that publishers invest more marketing dollars into our work because that frees us up to do more work. Even if they can, promote our work throughout different festivals, if they can even cover costs for us to travel, that is certainly an aspect of writing. I never considered it, the whole promotion cycle, but it is a very true aspect. And that is a barrier. That alone creates this barrier that people from certain socioeconomic levels, it makes it that much more difficult for them to promote their work if they can't pay to go to different events. And so my recommendation is do whatever you can without spending money. You have your local libraries. Librarians are amazing. They love having authors. Schedule, a talk with them. You can do talks there. You can do signings there. Your independent bookstores, whatever you can do within your local community that is not going to cost you money is wonderful.
And I know you've spoken about your parents, and but as a parting thought, since it is Las Comadres, a little bit about your Puerto Rican background, a little bit more about how maybe that's influenced you or helped you to see things differently.
Yeah, so so the cool thing is I got to see Bad Bunny in Puerto Rico recently for the residency. So I was just there a few weeks ago. Um, Being there back in the island, I I think, if, for those that know us, we know that we land and we start clapping. And as soon as I get there, I'm crying, I'm clapping. Um, I, it's something that I was born there, I was raised here, but it was part of growing up. My dad always reminded us, this is who you are. You're Puerto Rican. There are pictures of like farmers in the house and like those local like rural communities. He wanted us to even like visually see what these places looked like. Chicago has a very strong Puerto Rican community. I spent a lot of time there, and some of those after school art programs at their restaurants. And so it's definitely been something it's just part of my identity. The food, the music, uh, I I wish I could live there. I really wish I could live there if I could. But I am here because of my children. So
Good. I had the pleasure of going to Puerto Rico a couple of times, and it is beautiful. And my parents say it reminds them very much of Cuba. So just beautiful. I can imagine. I can imagine living in Puerto Rico also. So, Cynthia, I think we're heading toward the ending of our conversation. I wanted to more than thank you. I know it's not always easy to talk about some of this stuff, but I'm sure everyone in the audience has really appreciated it. And
Thank
one of the reasons we love this group, right, Las Comadres nationwide, is to help promote our Latina authors such as yourself.
Yeah. So thank you all. This is like, I always enjoy speaking with you. Thank you all for what you do. It's such important work and we all recognize it. So thank you. It's been wonderful speaking with you, Carmen, and thank you, Las Comadres.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. We're just waiting. I think our author, Adela, may be having some difficulty and she hasn't been able to come. But we're asking her interviewer, Elizabeth Esperanza, excuse me, if she'd like to say a few words.
Yes. Hi, my name is Esperanza. I was looking forward to interviewing Adela about her book. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it. So the book, Los Muertos, it's Day of the Dead. It's a fiction-based novel. It's a collection of short stories. It's an anthology. It's pretty thick. I think it has over a dozen writers. It ranges from super short to pretty lengthy short stories, all about death and the experience of death, how we experience, in both individually and as a culture, how we experience death and how we celebrate it. Some are kind of like scary stories, so it's not necessarily about death. It's kind of has that little feel of just the scale of just the, like, for example, there's one about a headless girl in a green dress, um, which is a really nice read, and then another person who explodes, so they die in an explosion. Some are kind of graphic, and then others are more spiritual, with a dad or a mom. So recommended completely. Um, like I said, I was looking forward to interviewing Adela because I read a little bit about her, that she wrote something about the Mexican Revolution. So I was interested in how that might connect to her interests. And yeah, but definitely if you want to go get it, and very interesting. And then, well, I wanted to ask her too about her intro because she wrote the intro, and she wrote about how the commercialization of Dia de Muertos has kind of taken us away from the spiritual side, and I wanted to get her thoughts on that. But if anybody has any thoughts on that, I'd love to hear.
Thank you, Esperanza.
Adela's here.
Adela just showed up. Oh my goodness. Esperanza, are you ready again? Okay, let me,
So
I guess,
hang on. Julia first.
Yeah, Julia, you can introduce them. Thank you, Esperanza. And welcome, Adela.
Welcome.
You're on mute.
There we go.
Okay, good.
So our second interview is with Adela Pineda Franco, a scholar and essayist specializing in the intersections of literature, film, and politics in Latin America and transatlantic studies. She holds the Joe R. and Teresa Lozano Long Chair in Latin American Studies at the University of Texas at Austin. Her major works include Geopolíticas de la Cultura Finesecular, Steinbeck y Mexico, and the Mexican Revolution on the World Stage. She has received awards, including the U.S. Mexico Fund for Culture and the Malcolm Lowry Literary Essay Prize. She currently leads the Mellon-funded project Pido la Palabra, a Texas prison literature project for social justice and the literary imagination. Interviewing Adela is Comadre Esperanza Beltran, who has been an active member of Las Comadres since 2020, contributing as both a writer and artist. She's also the creator of Unpopular History of Mexico, a Substack newsletter that shares overlooked stories from Mexican history. Through Unpopular History of Mexico, Esperanza aims to help future generations see their heritage with pride and curiosity, showing that history can be both empowering and deeply personal. Take it away, Comadre Esperanza.
Hi, welcome, Adela. I'm glad you were able to make it.
Oh, thank you. I am so sorry. I thought it was an hour of difference because I didn't realize the time zone. And so I am sorry, but I'm glad here, and my apologies for the delay, but here I am.
Yeah, no worries. I think with Zoom, it's happened to all of us at some point. We're on different, we're connecting from different parts of the world.
Yes.
So I'm glad you're here. I wanted to say, well, of course, thank you for joining us. And then if you can tell us about how this anthology came to be of Los Muertos.
Yes, it actually started with a collaboration with a friend who is also a writer. Her name is Yvette Benavides. She used to work for Trinity University Press and let me know about this project. The idea of the project was to bring together Mexican and Mexican American writers, contemporary writers, who would write stories related to this celebration. And then, unfortunately, she couldn't finish the project. So I concluded the anthology myself. But why the Day of the Dead, and why contemporary literature? We thought of thinking about rituals, like the Day of the Dead is such an important celebration for Mexicans and Latin Americans in both sides of the border. And it's an ancient tradition. It has roots in Spain and in indigenous nations prior to the conquest. And so this syncretism, this coming together of different rites, thinking about death, is what we have now in a cycle of celebrations with different cultural, accents. But in the end, the idea is to bring together the living and the dead in one single day in communion. And this is what we celebrate the Day of the Dead, November the 2nd. But these writers took this motif to talk about other topics that have to do with not only death, but love, the ravages of modernization, inequality, gender, many other topics that they built around the Day of the Dead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did notice that. And let me start with a little bit with what you mentioned about Mexican and Mexican American. What differences or similarities did you see between the writings, if there were any, which I'm sure there were?
Yes, well, let me tell you a little bit about the similarities first, and then we can talk about the differences. I think one big difference between the traditional idea of the Day of the Dead and our approach to it nowadays has to do with the way we approach death in general. The ancient people thought of death in a more natural way. We live along death with less fear or less shame. We didn't hide death before people would mourn their loved ones in their houses. Now we take them to funerary homes, or we don't talk about that much. And that's a process of secular modernization. We kept the right, but we are more, I guess we feel strange to talk about that, although we are surrounded by that. And I think this idea is in many of the stories. I don't think it makes a difference if you are Mexican American or Mexican. I think it's something that you see in many of the stories. Another similarity is that most of these stories are about um, human relations about mothers with daughters, husband and wife, friends, job circumstances, and you see that in both writers. I guess one of the differences that I see is that in the case of Mexican American writers, they are more conscious about the difference between Anglo Americans and Mexican Americans and how this celebration brings to the fore that difference that has cultural overtones, but also political and socioeconomic ones. In the case of Mexican stories, they don't talk about that difference.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I did notice that in the writings about the political and social commentary, um, which was interesting. And kind of on that, you talked about Juan Rulfo and what is the name of the book? It escaped me right now.
Pedro Páramo?
Pedro Paramo, yes. So that's kind of a Mexican experience on death. Do you think that speaks to a more, Mexican view of death? And is there a difference?
Okay, I think like the idea of death in Mexican culture has many origins. Um, in its, I guess I would say in its urban scenario, we could go back to the end of the 19th century, at the beginning of the 20th century, where we had Jose Guadalupe Posada, who is the artist who is the I guess the one who made the Katrina, the Katrinas that are so popular. He was a drawer. He used to draw um, skeletons in newspapers in Mexico City to make satires, political satire or cultural satires. And for some reason, he used characters that were skeletons. And these skeletons refer to, people who were known in the public opinion. And later on, this aesthetic went to painters like Diego Rivera and Frida Kahlo, and then they traveled the world. And then there was this writer called Octavio Paz, who won the Nobel Prize, by the way, he's a Nobel Prize winner, and wrote an essay that is called The Labyrinth of Solitude. And The Labyrinth of Solitude is a book about Mexican identity. And one of the chapters discusses the idea of death in Mexican culture as part of Mexican identity. And so it became the idea that Mexicans are very familiar with death came to the fore in that essay. But I would say that Juan Rulfo is a very unique case. There is nothing like Juan Rulfo in Mexican or Latin American literature. I would say that that's the first modern cosmopolitan ghost story that Mexico brought to the world. Why is that such a special book? For several reasons. The first one is that Juan Rulfo wrote in the late 1950s, and he thought of Mexico's modern project as a failed project. We had the Mexican Revolution. The outcome of the revolution was supposed to be a successful story. And Rulfo felt that this was not the case, and that the workers, the farmers, and the normal people didn't actually have a better life after the revolution. And he wanted to do a critique about that. But instead of writing a political essay, what he wrote was a ghost story. And the ghost story is about a man who goes to a town called Comala, and he goes there because his mother tells him to find his father. He's a bastard. His father never married his mother, and he should reclaim his place as the son of this man, whose name is Pedro Páramo. And Pedro Páramo is a bad guy. He's a cacique. He has enslaved the whole community of Comala. But when Juan Rulfo arrived to Comala, the town is already a ghost town. Everybody's dead. There are no living beings in the town. And in the middle of the novel, we learn that Juan, the narrator, who is this guy who goes to Comala, is also dead. So he's telling us a story from his grave. And what is very original about this novel is that because all of them are dead, they are all outside the living space of time. So there is no time. Everything happens all the time because they are ghosts, flying in the outer space. And I guess this is why this novel became such an iconic modern novel, not only because it was very truly Mexican, but because it also brought a style narrative that was very unique. And so this is why I talk about this, great book that I actually recommend to everybody.
Yeah, I had a chance to watch the Netflix. I think it's on Netflix, the movie. But yeah, I recommend that as well.
Did you like it?
I did. I was a little confused, but it was at the end, and I guess I didn't really catch that, commentary on the revolution and the post-revolution of Mexico. But I'll probably have to watch it again with that in mind. So thank you.
I guess what is really nice about that novel is that Pedro Páramo, who is, the corruption of the revolution, the cacique, the guy who doesn't have any remorse to do bad things, is also the character who is capable of loving Susana San Juan with full force. And that makes it, of Pedro Páramo, a complex character, more of a human character, So that's why I also think is very, very good.
Yeah, that's true. And can you tell me a little bit about, I read your introduction several times, because I was interested in, in your thoughts, and just trying to understand what you were trying to say. In the end, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in the end, what I understood is that, our modern view, or the modern way we do the Day of the Dead, El Día de Muertos, and, with the commercialization of it with the movies, and you mentioned Spectre. That kind of contrasted with the more personal and the roots of the celebration. So what are your thoughts on because this is what my thought was, like, we the commercialization of it might take us away from the root, or might change it a little bit, but it also brings our culture to the mainstream and to the forefront. So it's kind of like a give and take there. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you're totally right. When I wrote this introduction, I was thinking about why people, and I was thinking here about my experience growing up in Mexico. And, my parents or my family were not really very religious, but we were surrounded by little towns where the Day of the Dead was a very introspective ceremony, which meant that people would set up their altars, they would go to the cemetery, and they would really truly believe that their beloved dead would come that night and join them, and had a sense of communion. And this was a cyclical celebration. What mattered was that no matter what, no matter if it rained or if it, if there were problems, people would have to do the same, right? Like they have to repeat the ceremony. And I think this was seen as something that was a way to preserve a tradition. As I was saying, the commercialization of the Day of the Dead had two, I guess, two possibilities. One is that traditional view of the Day of the Dead um, gets spoiled because people, instead of being introspective, become very exhibitionist, right? We show the Day of the Dead in the TV, in cinema, in the streets, and there is all this kind of like spectacle about it. And I guess the religious aspect or the introspective aspect of the Day of the Dead is lost. But as you say, it is a way to make the Day of the Dead something to be proud of beyond the borders. And for people to think that this is a celebration that can also be appealing not only to Mexicans or Mexican Americans, but to the rest of the world. And when it gets in the mainstream media, then you have those two things, right? But my point was that the stories that we compile in these books are neither nor. They are not about tradition, but they are not also commercial. So it's an alternative. These writers are writing about, circumstances that are daily circumstances where the Day of the Dead is in the middle. And so the Day of the Dead is an occurrence in what we are about to read. And that's what makes them very, I would say, very readable.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, they are very real. How was the selection process?
Well, the selection process was that we did invite the writers. We didn't open a call. We had we read writers who had already written about the topic. Okay, so for instance, some of those writers had published stories on the Day of the Dead before we compiled them. This is the case of like Pedro Ángel Palou, Rosa Beltrán, um, who else? Let me see if I have Guadalupe Netel, Ana Garcia Bergua. Okay, those stories had already been published in Spanish, but we thought let's translate them into English and let's ask these writers for permission so that they can also be read in the United States and not only in Mexico. In the case of Mexican American writers, most of them were original stories. And we really wanted to like blur the border. We didn't want to say these are Mexicans and these are Mexican Americans. We wanted to have, writers on both sides of the border contributing their craft to this idea.
So and then on that, like how do you celebrate it personally? How do you keep it alive in your life, the celebration?
Well, when I was growing up, we needed to have our altar at home. Always we had an altar, and I kept that habit while my daughter was growing up. Even I migrated to the United States in the 1990s, and then I raised my only child in Boston, Massachusetts, where it was really cold. By November the 2nd, it was already very cold, and I try to differentiate between Halloween and the Day of the Dead because, the Halloween is spooky, the Day of the Dead is more, I would say, spiritual. It's like you should not be fearful about the dead coming back because these are people you love and you really would like to see them. So I instill in my daughter the idea of doing this altar for my father, for my mother, for some pets. We would put, food, and we would put like beverages, and I kept the tradition. And now I do it some years, and I do it, and some years I don't. But I always try to just like light up a candle, because actually my mother died October 31st, very close to the Day of the Dead. So I always had it in mind, and I think. I also like to go to the cemetery when I am in Mexico. I love the idea of the flowers. The orange flowers is one of the most beautiful aspects of this celebration. It's actually a pre-Hispanic one. The flower is called Cempasúchil, um, which is a flower that connects the living with the dead.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's nice that you still keep it, even if it's here and there, but to keep it alive it's good.
Yes.
So thank you for joining us, Adela. That was my last question there. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
Well, I thank you all very much. As I said, I'm sorry to have been here a little late, but I invite you all to read these stories. They are easy reading. They are daily life stories. And what I like most about these stories is that they are not about things that you would not relate to. They are stories about our common feelings of loneliness, love, jealousy, and how we solve these issues. And this is what is nice, is how the Day of the Dead is in the middle of these things in a circumstantial way. So I hope you read the anthology and you get to know these writers on both sides of the border.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Adela. Well, thank you everybody for joining. I think it's time to take it to
Me.
Tess.
Okay. That was lovely. Thank you very much. We extend our heartfelt gratitude to our authors and publishers tonight, Tinta Books and Thomas and Mercer, for generously donating books to our early registrants. Special thanks to our incredible interviewers, Comadres Esperanza and Carmen. We appreciate our audience for joining us tonight and submitting thoughtful questions. Most importantly, we want to recognize our dedicated volunteers, without whom this book club and its associated work would not be possible. Mil gracias. Supporting Latina authors is crucial to our mission. We encourage you to write reviews on platforms like Amazon, Goodreads, and Barnes & Noble, as these reviews significantly impact publishers and potential readers. Consider purchasing books to directly support our authors, and if your local library lacks a title you are interested in, don't hesitate to request they order it. We invite you to attend our virtual local book club meetings and bring friends along. Remember, our book club is open to men and women, Latinos and non-Latinos, and all are welcome. Looking ahead, our November books are The Witches of El Paso by Luis Jaramillo and I'll Give You a Reason by Anel Lopez. Thank you all for your continued support of Las Comadres and Friends National Book Club. Please join us in celebrating Las Comadres and Friends National Book Club by buying books and supporting Latina authors. Let's applaud and amplify diverse literary voices throughout the year. Good night to all, and always read Latino Lit. Gracias.
Buenas noches.